see the statistics of players going broke in retirement or coming under financial hardship, I can really understand how that happens. If you're used to a certain level of earnings, your lifestyle naturally matches that earnings. If you're making 100 grand a week, but you're spending 110, you're going to be in the red. And unfortunately, footballers are kind of totally out of sync with what real earnings look like. The worst run I've ever seen was my experience at Leeds under Massimo Cellino, just because he was a full-blown lunatic. I mean, obviously he's had a number of fraudulent things that have come against him, hugely disrespectful, sacked numerous people across the club, the training ground, the stadium, just really unstable.
Did you feel that in the team?
With an agent's fee, it's a benefit in kind, so player is liable to pay the tax on an agent's fee, but I would always know what my tax bill is going to look like because he's totally transparent. Often that's not the case. I've got friends that have had agents that never disclosed the size of that fee, then come January get stung with an absolute monster fee, and they'll be like, what the hell is going on?
Matt, it's so great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey boys, I've been a long-standing admirer of you guys for a number of years. So yeah, it's an honour to be chatting with you today.
I'll tell you about you. It feels like quite a meaningful moment, this one, because Matt was part of the first conversation I think we had when we looked at the value of integrating sport into investment. When you guys, I think, started talking.
He slid into my DMs.
Nah, vice versa.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
I've actually seen the evidence.
Yeah.
I've seen the evidence.
Was it really?
I was just trying to find out how long ago it was, because that was like my first foray into venture. Like Alex, like our mutual friend, he was the one that I was like, right, what do I need to read? What do I need to listen to? This was like early on in my Fulham days. And he was like, well, you got to get on 20 VC. So that was my first kind of awakening to the world of venture many moons ago. And that was my daily commute to Hotspur Park and back for a long time, was listening to those podcasts.
So you're saying everything that you do now is his fault?
Everything. The job I find myself in is all Harry's fault. Yeah.
Did we not agree I get 20% of anything that you make?
I think that was it. Yeah,
that was the deal.
But yeah, no, it's true.
But it's a perfect place to start, because the reason you guys did that or had that conversation was based on you obviously still playing, but also getting to a part in your career where you were thinking about what you wanted to do next. You were doing something that we don't often see a lot of in football, which was going through a education while still on the pitch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think going into the game kind of the unconventional way, going to university first, then kind of fortuitously finding myself in pro sport, it was one of those where I always had that kind of mindset for endeavours off the field. And yeah, the world of tech kind of was presented to me on a plate through Alex at Velocity Black, and I kind of naively jumped into it with 2 feet. And really, probably like you guys when you started, just got the bug and really just wanted to learn, not even for like a real desire to make big financial returns, but just kind of to learn. Like, I think like Social Network was my favorite film at the time. Like, I really enjoyed the kind of the value proposition of technology. And then kind of through Velocity Black, which was my first foray into kind of angel investing, I just wanted to learn. And that's where I was doing a lot of piggybacking off Alex and investing in different bits and pieces. I just wanted to just continue that education and do it my own way, just learning, reading, listening, networking.
You're an educated dude, and we don't have many educated footballers who are British in the nicest way, but it seems that there are a lot more like continentally educated people. I think of your Juan Matas of the world, your Mario Götzes of the world, and it feels like we reduce the importance of education for footballers, especially English footballers, and they still hold it in very high regard. Do you think that's fair? And is there a disparity in the education standards of European to British footballers?
Potentially. There might be. Listen, I've been, my bread and butter now is dealing with players all day, every day. And I definitely think there's plenty of educated guys out there. And there's guys with a real desire to learn. That's the one thing I found. I think the one thing that we maybe do a lot of is delegating decision making. And I think that can erode from education when it comes to players. They outsource every element of their life. What we do, particularly what I do now with at Sequel, is we're a big believer in empowering players to make their own decisions, and with that comes a lot of education. And I think the two go hand in hand. And I think it's always a pleasure for me to see players taking more ownership of their decision making, because with that I think comes a need to educate, a need to learn, a need to understand. And that's something I for sure will always encourage with guys that I speak to on a regular basis.
What do you mean delegated decision making? This is agents just do everything.
Everything, to the nth degree. Like player liaisons at clubs will pay players' bills for them, pay parking tickets for them, like every aspect. And that's the problem. I think players, when they come to eventually transition, and 9 people out of 10 kind of dissipate from their lives, they're not equipped with the tools over the years to do all these things, and not just the simple things, but the more important things, financial decisions. And I think that's where players can come unstuck a little bit, is not having sort of just the tools and wherewithal to make really important decisions.
And that's a lack of evolution of the industry to an extent, isn't it? Because traditionally, you could have had your agent who dealt with the majority of the work outside of it, which was, let's say, contracts and commercial. Yeah. But over the last 20 years, if we're really looking at where value for players has come, it's come from their ability to deploy maybe an excess amount of cash that people don't often have at their disposal, i.e. build some form of business portfolio for themselves beyond that's going to work for them, as well as their traditional let's invest in property. But they don't have anyone that actually is skilled to do that. An agent isn't prepared to do that. But also, it kind of goes against the agent's incentive structures, right? They do a deal, they get a percentage. It's a quick transaction. An investment's often not. An investment's a long time, 5 to 7 to maybe 10 years until you get some money back. So you need to have people coming into the game who are able to help them deal with that side of it alongside an agent.
100%. And specialists, like you say, there's not a tremendous amount for that, for, alternative type assets. There's not a tremendous amount of upside for these guys. So, one, it's generally a smaller portion of what they're doing. And 2, like I said, they're not kind of incentivized for that to be a part of the wheelhouse. So I think having specialists that can come in and take the hand of these guys is really important. But as you know, more than anyone, it is an access game. And
so if you're a footballer listening to this, what is the right structure to have around you then? Is it an agent who manages short-term transactions like transfers, more quick hit kind of financial moves, and then investment managers that manage the long term? How do you think about the right structure that players should have around them?
I think that's you're close there for sure. I mean, ultimately, as a player, priority number one is performance on the field, and with that, you definitely need a great agent. Like I was lucky; I had the same agent my whole career. He always did right by me, And I think certainly the agent really comes into the fore when you're not doing great. When you're doing great, anyone could get you a great deal. It's when times get tough how you really see the true colours of your agent. So fundamentally, that's going to be the most important thing.
When was the toughest time where you saw the truest colours?
Probably the back end of my time at Fulham, when the new manager came in and I was really struggling for minutes, and then he got me a move to QPR on a better contract than what I was on at Fulham. And that was probably the one time I thought, wow, you've pulled off an incredible deal for me, because I was not only struggling, on the pitch, but off the pitch. When you're not playing, it can be quite demoralising to then go to QPR on a better deal with a new lease of life under a manager who really wanted me. That was probably the one time where I thought, wow, yeah, you've done incredibly well there. And then a second time, probably I would say, was my time at Millwall, when I'd done 2 years and then got offered a third year on a horrendous pay cut, and then somehow I managed to stay on pretty much the same deal that I was prior. So there are a couple of instances where you think, right, okay, I'm down here, and then all of a sudden he pulls you back up here, and then that's what I'd probably say is when you see their true colours.
Have you got an example of a flip side where you've seen, obviously your agent was great for your whole career, but where you've seen real mismanagement by an agent? And don't obviously say the names, but just what happened.
All the time. I think, players getting stuck in deals and they can't escape when maybe they should. I think probably you see players move to clubs where you think, why have you gone there? Maybe incentivize. A lot of these agents are quite close with certain clubs, that because a lot of what you don't see with agents is a lot of them work for the clubs as well as the players. It kind of goes unnoticed a little bit in their work.
What do you mean they work for them? They get kickers?
So yeah, my agent was really close with Aston Villa for a number of years. So he would help with a lot of the exits, and he'd help, and just totally under the radar, ghost mode. And he'd do a lot of work with the club to try and help get players out of the building or bring players in, So
is that legal? I mean, in
Absolutely.
financial markets, that's playing both sides. It's completely illegal.
So not often with the same player, but often when you find with an agency contract, there'll be the club's fee and the agency fee. So sometimes the agent will take both, and then sometimes it'll be two agents, one taking the club and one taking the player. So it can work both ways. But there's a lot that goes unnoticed and unsaid, and a lot of agents that work exclusively with clubs, and you wouldn't really hear of them.
What's the obligation of the agent to share information with you?
There isn't. And again, you're going back to players getting stung, like tax bills. See that all the time. Way more common than you think. Obviously, with an agent's fee, it's benefit in kind. So player is liable to pay the tax on an agent's fee. I've done that all my life, but I would always know what my tax bill is going to look like, because my agent would say, this was my percentage of the fee. He's totally transparent. Often that's not the case. And then a player come January, when the HMRC come calling, will get stung with an incredible bill. I've seen players get rid of their agents for that reason. Because
so you pay the tax?
You pay the tax on the
agent's fee?
Yeah, it's a benefit in kind. So yeah, if my agent's getting 5% of my contract, I'll pay the tax on that fee.
Wow. So in some cases, that'll be 8% total, really, you're paying on the 5%.
Yeah, it can be really quite substantial, especially for the bigger agents' fees. But yeah, I've got friends that have had agents that never disclosed the size of that fee, then come January get stung with an absolute monster fee, and they'll be like, what the hell is going on? And often the fee isn't the 5% that is standard. It's they carve out a bigger allocation for themselves, and yeah, it can be really quite ugly.
How much does, not illegal, but just a bit bad behavior, not disclosing fees, how much does that permeate in the ecosystem? Does it, or actually is it quite contained?
I would say, listen, I don't have first-hand experience, and like I said, I was lucky enough to work with a really good guy who was really transparent, really open. I would say, there's a lot of grey area when it comes to things like that.
But is it known who bad actors are, or is it actually quite hidden?
I would say reasonably well known. The problem is now as well and luckily it's become regulated again. The industry was unregulated for such a long time, which it became a bit of the Wild West, where anyone and everyone could be an agent or an intermediary. For some reason, absolutely no idea why, they decided to scrap regulation, decided to scrap any form of qualification. So anyone could be an agent. You could be my intermediary and do my deal for me. Whereas now, luckily, we're back to a state of regulation where hopefully the bad actors can go to one side. But yeah, it is a bit of a worry.
From the outside, footballers always seem very financially secure, but how fragile does it sometimes feel?
I would say a lot more fragile than you think, and I say that for a few reasons. I think certainly coming from experience now, being on the other side of the curtain, and you see the statistics of players going broke in retirement or coming under financial hardship, I can really understand how that happens. And I think everything's relative. I think if you're used to a certain level of earnings, your lifestyle naturally matches that earnings. If you're making 100 grand a week, but you're spending 110, you're going to be in the red. And I can understand a keeping up with the Joneses type lifestyle type mentality. And unfortunately, footballers or sports people at large are kind of in a bit of a bubble and kind of totally out of sync with what real earnings look like. A six-figure salary, unfortunately, wouldn't scratch the sides of a lot of the lifestyles that these players live. So naturally, when the retirement comes, trying to adjust or readjust to the new chapter, new lifestyle, I think a lot of players can come unstuck with what normality looks like, unfortunately. So I think players can find themselves in a really fragile position unless you, like you say, you plan, you invest correctly, invest wisely, have provisions in place for your second chapter. I can totally understand where guys will come unstuck for sure.
Should we have sympathy for that? In the nicest way, if a young person is irresponsible with their money and doesn't save for the future, you blame them. Why should we have sympathy for them?
I think I definitely have an element of sympathy. I would probably lean more on the support network in guiding them. What you have to remember is a lot of these kids don't have a conventional route into work. They lack probably significant amount of education because they've sacrificed a lot of their time to make the pro game. And unfortunately, if you don't have the right guidance, the right support, the people on your end making the right decisions for you, that's probably where I can sympathise with some of the players.
What was your first big contract?
Depends what you mean by big contracts. So my largest contract I was very lucky in the sense that I kind of had similar earnings across Fulham, QPR, Millwall. I was always kind of the similar good level. I think the biggest difference I saw was going from Oldham to Leeds. So Oldham, I signed on peanuts. I was on £500 a week, which I was so grateful. So grateful to just have the opportunity to be, like, for me, I was applying, like I said, I was applying for graduate roles out of university. I never thought I'd end up in pro sport. So when Paul Dickoff came knocking, I actually vividly remember the conversation. I had a lawyer who was looking after me at the time. He was really good at taking guys from non-league to the league, or he had a reputation to. And he was like, right, I've got you this deal, £600 a week at Oldham. And I was like, oh, amazing, delighted. Like, don't have to worry about work. I can give this football thing a go. I remember getting into Paul Dickoff's office at Oldham. He was like, right, £500 a week. And I remember thinking, hang on a sec, I thought it was 600. I was like, yep, 500's fine. Just like nodded. I was like, I'm not going to mess this up. So yeah, I think, that was my first contract. And I think 2 years later, I went to Leeds. I think I was on £4,000 a week when I started. And it was a really incentivized deal. So I think I'd scored 13, 14 goals my first year. I played 45 games. By the end of the season, I was on 11. So I think that was what felt like the biggest jump. Do you know what I mean? In terms of like going from relatively small amount of money to the type of money where you don't really need to look at sort of price tags, or you can generally buy what you want to buy or go on a nice holiday. That was probably where I felt the most when I jumped to that. But then other than that, it was quite stable. But I was always trying to be sensible. Like, I'd always kind of live within my means, but not to a level where, like I said, as and when the curtain calls, that I'm going to have to readjust everything. Nothing silly. I was always
What was the biggest contract?
The biggest contract, QPR was my biggest contract.
How much was that?
$1 million a year.
$1 million a year?
Yeah.
Was that big for Championship?
Big, yeah, absolutely. Big. At the time, I think the manager really wanted me. I think that was the biggest pull. And
Who was the manager?
Ian Holloway at the time, who I loved. I absolutely loved.
I bet you did.
Yeah, I think the
weird.
I would have loved him twice as much if he paid me $2 million.
I think, listen, I loved him for a lot of reasons, not just bringing me to the club, but just the way he was, and as a human being, as a person, like as a people person, he's as good as I've met.
Big 6'5" strikers right in his playbook,
right,
isn't it?
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. So, and he tried to sign me before. So I remember walking into the first day I watched the office. He was like, "I've got you! I finally got you!" And he gave me this big hug, and he's legend of a fella.
So when you start earning real money, a lot of money, $1 million a year is a lot. Are you then really starting to think, okay, I need to plan, I need to put in place long-term investment strategies, I need to be a lot more thoughtful about this?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was always that way inclined to begin with. It was like just relative to whatever I was earning. But I think, that was always in the back of my mind, is like try and save, try and plan, just try and be semi-conservative. Like I said, 90% of the stuff I was doing, I would say stayed in the conservative wheelhouse, and then 10% by that point I was applying to venture, and that was the aspect of my financial decisions that I enjoyed the most, learning about these founders and companies, and meeting VCs and all that. That was definitely the thing I enjoyed, but definitely the smallest piece of the pie.
But we have a situation now where we always talk about the things that players can be doing alongside the game, but then we also have that problem of focus. The ones that do really well, obviously you hear great stories, then you have the ones that don't do as well, and everyone talks about wasted talent or they were too distracted. What was the balance?
There's obviously like a big, it's like a myth that players don't have time and they're so busy with the sport, which is definitely true, but I always found it to complement. Like, the thing for me as well is I was kind of a single guy, and what I mean by single is I didn't have kids for much part of my 20s. I lived largely by myself in London. So I did have time in the afternoons to meet people, network, apply some thinking time to other things other than football. Whereas if I'd had kids young, or it could have been a different kettle of fish. So I think for me, I thought it complemented what I was doing. It gave me an additional focus. It gave me something else to think about and not get too consumed in sport, which can bog you down because, like I said, everyone kind of looks at a highlight reel, but with that comes a lot of lows and a lot of hardship and a lot of, tough mental moments. But I always found it to be complementary. Like I love using my time wisely, and in the afternoons, maybe not close to a game, but earlier in the week, meeting people or learning, and trying to just do things that would benefit me long term. I wanted to apply that time to something useful.
Did you ever have concerns around what it would do for you in a dressing room? A lot of people think about, following the crowd and stepping outside of the zone, particularly in I'd imagine quite a close-knit group like football, where you don't necessarily need to be doing the things that make you different.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was too loud about it. I think you kind of naturally know who's that way inclined in every dressing room you're in. You obviously see these guys every day. You chat at lunch, at breakfast, during training, out of on travel.
Are you talking about business?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's plenty of moments where I think every dressing room will tell you there are guys in the locker room that want to chat about business. Not necessarily venture, but other aspects of business, and it's great. Loads of dinner conversations, and those are the prime moments. I would say away day travel is like prime moment where you're on a plane, you're on a bus, you're on a train. You're in a hotel for hours on end. There's a lot of waiting around. That's one thing with sport is people don't realize there's a lot of waiting around to train and to play. There's a lot of moments where you're just like this around a table waiting for an hour for the next scheduled thing to happen. And naturally you talk about anything and everything. And yeah, business is definitely a big aspect of it. What are you doing? Who do you do stuff with? Those are normal, natural conversations.
Which teammate surprised you the most if you were having these conversations?
Oh, it's a good question.
That's a great question.
That's a really good question. Yeah, definitely come across some really, really savvy people. Maybe come back to me on that one because I'll definitely have an answer for you.
Which teammate was legitimately the most low IQ person?
Why? There's always two sides. If we ever ask one of those questions, you're not going to get the best one.
No, I can't out anyone. But honestly, there are some really, really savvy people, and some people really surprise you. You would have no idea, but yeah, really savvy switching guys.
How much money do you think you need to be making to start thinking about doing venture, doing angel investing, to be doing what we do?
It's a really good question. I would say at the younger age, it's more geared around potential. How do you see your future earnings going? Like I said, if it's precarious, then I would say be more conservative. And this is not me giving advice, but I would generally say be more conservative if you think the trap door could be pulled at any point. For guys that have huge potential, I get jealous of guys with huge potential, the opportunity to start early. I started about 26. If I could have started earlier, I would have been delighted. I always think of something like venture as being the opportunity to make those big lump sum returns when you actually need it in retirement. When you're playing, you have so much surplus income that you don't need. You need to be putting some of that away for when you actually do need it on the other side of 35. But yeah, definitely venture dollars. I think, like I said, anything north of, hard to really put a number on it. If
I'm a young footballer listening and I'm on 500k a year, okay.
Absolutely. Well, it depends. Like I said, it depends where your entry point is. If you're able to deploy over a number of companies every single year consistently, absolutely fantastic. Like I said, 10-15% of your pot, if you're able to allocate that to venture, you stand yourself in a great stead. And as long as you're doing it right with the right people who have a track record and know what they're doing, I think fundamentally that's
one of
the key.
Biggest mistakes that you see young players make when they suddenly make money.
Well, spending it with no real plan. I think, outgoings can be rife just with, cars and clothes and rent and all sorts of just
highly illiquid assets.
It's also watches is better. At least it retains value.
But yeah,
fucking
an
cars
argument.
is terrible. Cars and
terrible. I think as well, and you see it a lot, is when players are supporting other people. It's not just themselves they're supporting, when they're supporting and listen, all for supporting family. I did it when I played and I would always do it, but that's a way for you to deplete quickly, for sure.
Do you see that a lot?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think things like that will go more unnoticed. But yeah.
Do you remember when Oscar moved to Shanghai? I did fair play to the guy. He came out and he just said, "Look, you may think that this is ridiculous and I'm ending my career, but I've been offered 400 grand net a week and I support a village in Brazil."
Yeah,
and he was there for years. No?
He only just left.
Yeah.
So and what I liked about that
It's the honesty.
It's the honesty. And it was a bit of the Jordan Henderson piece last year or 2 years ago when he went to Saudi. When you've got all of this money now, I don't think anyone can begrudge someone turning down $700K a week if that's put in front of you. I do think, particularly in this, whether we deserve it or not, people do just want you to be honest about your motivations.
100%. I think it's refreshing when people do say things like that. I think it's just, people that can sniff out the bullshit. I think it's quite refreshing for people to say, listen, I moved for financial reasons. And listen, you can't begrudge them that. They have a family to support. Like 9 people out of 10 would do the same thing.
Has there been an example of you having huge success with an investment that you've made?
My first one. Like I said, I fell into venture very fortuitously. Velocity Black was the first thing I was ever presented with. At the time, it wasn't even Velocity Black. It was Velocity, which was a remote payments app that pivoted into a digital concierge platform. So that was my first ever investment. The earliest stage investors made nearly 60 times their money. So off the first investor, my perception of venture and what it could probably do for you is probably a little bit skewed because that was my first experience. Obviously, since then I've had failures. I've had other ones that have gone south. But you only need, it's a game of outliers. And that's what I always say to players. It's a game of outliers. You need to spread your seed across a number of companies to find those outliers that can return everything and more.
So in doing that, you can literally, you can almost double like a career earnings piece
At
in
least.
one investment.
In one hit, yeah, absolutely. And if you invest wisely, in the right people, we're always looking for, companies that have all the signals and all the minerals to, people who've been there, done that. I always try to, I use like a sporting analogy a lot of the time. So one of the guys I'm particularly close to in the US, he won't mind me saying, he plays for the Bucks, or sorry, not now, but he played for the Bucks and he was a Super Bowl champ the year Brady came. The Bucks hadn't won a title since 2002, I think, had very limited to no success. And I kind of reframe it with investing. It's like, I'm sure when Brady came into your dressing room, you thought, right, my chances of success this season have just absolutely gone through the roof. And I try to use it with investing. Is if you position yourself with people, with professionals who know what success tastes like, they're not just saying that they have the capabilities of doing that, they've done it. Your chances of success will naturally increase, and it can translate to their own experience in sport. If you've got a manager who's won trophies, or if you've got a player who has experience of promotion or winning, it's only going to help your cause. Not just people who say they can do things, but people who've actually done it. It's a huge difference in my mind.
What do you think makes athletes valuable to business?
Now I think potential, and I think it's a young man's game now. Certainly when I started sport, I remember vividly there being lots of senior players in the team. Like when I came to Leeds, there was 6-7 guys over 30 easily. Now I think it's kind of flipped on its head, and everyone's trying to almost do a Brighton or a Brentford where they have this recruitment model where they can they can recruit and sell. You only have to look at like teams like Bournemouth who do incredibly well. But I think, value is now potential at young age. And I think as soon as you creep past a certain age, your value kind of tends to fall off a cliff. So I think that's what clubs are certainly looking for. Even in coaches now, you have to look at the model of managing, the model of coaching. Everything's going down the young head coach route.
Liam Rosenior.
Yeah. You only have to look at that as a prime example. It's like, young.
Come on.
And this is nothing against Liam. I feel sorry for the guy.
Why?
You only have to.
Why do you feel sorry for him?
We can't go down this. I'll go.
Yeah, you can. Of course you can. Everyone hates me. They can hate you a little bit. Come on. Why do you feel sorry for him?
He couldn't have looked like he wanted this job less in all of this last week, because he is doing a great job at Strasbourg. And he's at the level probably that he should be. He's a developing coach. He's 41 years old. You get that chance, you can't say no. But the reality is, for his career, use a player example, it's exactly the same type of thing as you could say, okay, so Liam Delap gets, great season last year with Ipswich, gets relegated. Should he have gone to an Everton this year before going into a club like a Chelsea? I'd look at it exactly in that way, where sometimes that jump just may not be the best thing for the development of that person.
Who was the guy we had on the show who talked about football careers like levels on a building, and you go up linearly?
Pablo Longoria.
Yeah, very good.
The Marseille president.
He talked about Haaland and how he kind of strategically increased the stage of his careers. versus jump.
Jump, yeah.
So you've literally, that could have been my assumption for me going, I feel sorry for him. Feeling sorry is the wrong word because it's an amazing chance. Yeah. But he's in Pablo's terms, Liam's on floor 2 and he's doing a brilliant job on floor 2. And this is floor 6 or 7. Yeah. And you look at Haaland, his career was the perfect example, right? If he had gone from Molde to
Man City,
right, that would have been most likely too early for him. Very, very sensibly ends up in Salzburg, ends up at Dortmund, then at City when he's ready to take it. And my God, look at what he does.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. And I think probably 9 times out of 10, that would be the smart play. Probably,
if he'd done Birmingham to Madrid,
yeah, it might have been more extreme.
Dortmund is it's the hotbed.
Yeah,
right, for this,
there's almost like a network of clubs that almost act as that middle layer. You're right. You're probably right in saying that. It's interesting.
But bringing that back into
the management piece,
that's the piece.
Yeah,
that's what I meant. And I can't even remember how we mentioned Rosino.
Should managers be responsible for the kind of roundedness of players? In other words, if I'm a manager of a team, should I be saying, guys, you should be going home and spending a little bit of time reading about AI. I know it sounds stupid, but about things that may impact the broader economy and whatever that is.
Should they and do they? Obviously, 2 very different things. I definitely think, maybe not necessarily the manager, I definitely think there should be an onus on either the Players Association or the league or clubs larger to give broader educational pieces or opportunities to learn for players. Like,
is there any?
Minimal, very minimal. So obviously we do a lot of work now with the major leagues in the US, particularly the NBA and the NFL. What they do for their players is wild. And I brought it up with Maheta a number of times. Like, there's a few people I'd love you to meet. They will put them in rooms with business leaders, the best financial advisors. Or what they do as well is, when you're going back to the agency piece of bad actors, they will publicly out bad actors on league-wide emails. Don't listen to so-and-so. So-and-so's done this. Stay away from so-and-so. Literally league-wide. I went on a 5-day workshop in Nashville with 100 NFL players, and it was all geared around transition. It was just a week of experiencing, people that would just generally help them in the next stage of their lives. I just think it's really hands-on and really tangible and obvious. It's not just like a list of things that you have to go out and do yourself. It's really in your face.
But it all comes back to league structures and ownership. That's a franchise system. The ownership of those franchises, really, the control of those franchises sits in one body. That decision that gets made for players is the same as the decision that gets made for the broadcast or the commercial, the unified Nike deal on every single team. And the culture out there is very much a collective decision-making one. You bring that into here where you have ultimately fragmented decision-making and independent actors all playing a very different game. It's very hard to create that
for sure
unanimous mentality that's going to support players like this. But also, do they open themselves up to responsibility then if something doesn't go right?
Yeah,
and that's where
absolutely.
I've seen a lot of people push back. It's really the fear side.
100%, absolutely. I can totally understand that perspective as well. I think there's a balance to be had. I definitely think there's more certainly here that can be done for players to help them. Like I said, it is a kind of a scary proposition when you do come out the other side of the game, when all you've known is pro sport and that is your world, and now you have to start again. Or so a lot of guys do stay in sport to a degree, but there's lots that don't. And I think
for the average Premier League footballer, a lot of people are like, well, they've made so much money. They just see kind of back of the Daily Mail, 200 grand a week, 100 grand a week, and they never need to work again. And I'm probably falling into this kind of simplistic mind. Does a Premier League footballer need to work again after a career in Premier League teams?
Yeah, I would say so. I'd say 9 times. Again, it depends what lifestyle you want to lead. It's, if you want to live in a modest house with modest outgoings, maybe not. But if you've been used to 15 years of lavish lifestyles, holidays, gifts, a certain way of living, like just general outgoings are significantly not. Yeah, absolutely. But I also think there's more to work than just making money. It's a sense of purpose. And for me, that was the biggest thing when I retired was, what am I going to get up and go for in the morning? When my alarm goes off, am I enthusiastic to attack the day? And if I've got nothing on my plate because I've just got a pot of money in the background, I just think I'd be generally pretty demotivated, pretty, pretty underwhelmed going into it's the purpose piece. I think is the biggest thing, having a get up and go in the morning, something that you really enjoy doing as well.
Or we often refer to the Ferguson piece of saying he liked players who had families around them, wives, married young, because that brought a level of stability. You mentioned that you went through like your 20s living on your own, and you kind of had that single mentality. When you then met Amy, when you became a dad, did you see that side of your approach, like your spending, how you treated that money? Did that change notably?
Yeah, I think so. I think, listen, when you come down the route of kids and education and supporting, that is the number one priority in your life, and you're probably a little bit more guarded, a little bit more cautious in the way you spend, because ultimately you want to give them things, preserve things for them. So you probably have maybe you play more probably on defensively than you might have done previously when it was just yourself to think about. I think maybe there's an element of being a bit more conservative, which maybe you do see in players that settle down younger. For me, that happened at a later stage, so probably I was a bit more aggressive in my 20s than maybe other guys might be.
When you look at like player salaries or wages, how much is it in wages versus appearance fee, goal bonus, assist bonus?
Stacked. I mean, 9 times out of 10, there's an exception to the rule always, but 9 times out of 10 stacked heavily in salary, and then a chunk will get in appearance money, and then if you're a centre forward, naturally you'll get a goal bonus. If you're a defender or a goalkeeper, you'll probably get a clean sheet bonus, and then there'll be the team bonus structure, which gets negotiated at the beginning of every season or in the pre-season. The captain probably will come together with maybe a kind of more vocal player of the dressing room, will meet with the director of football or whoever at the club, the decision maker at the club, and they'll negotiate. And the last season's bonus schedule is the benchmark for this season's, for upcoming bonus schedule, and you'll negotiate that, what a win bonus looks like, what X finish in the league, what avoiding relegation, what winning a trophy might look like, rounds and all that sort of stuff.
Unless Harry Redknapp's your manager. In which case, it's like, well, I'm not paying him to miss them.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument for like a lot of things, like
why you should have a clean sheet bonus when you're paid to stop goals.
Or why you should have an appearance bonus when you're paid to play football. There's certainly a valid argument. Yeah. But
of your £100 you got in a year, what percent is salary versus?
I'd say a good £95 would be salary. Maybe £90. Let's say
£90 versus the other 10 coming from that. Talk to me about like external contracts with brands, with companies that want you to promote. How did that look in dressing rooms?
So I probably was a level too low to see that more commonly. I think brand deals, commercial deals, definitely operate for the elite of the elite. I think, those types of opportunities you'd see certainly the top end of the Premier League, maybe less so, even probably mid Premier League downwards. I would say we
were fascinated. We had Miguel, who's a leading Premier League agent on the show, and he said you'd be amazed by people who are sent back for the national English team won't have any brand deals.
100%, absolutely.
And it's just your Bellingham, and it's just your one or two top really who top get everything.
Niche. Yep, absolutely. And that's definitely true. I definitely say those are reserved for the elite crop of players. So I definitely didn't see any of that filter down into the Championship, where I was for the lion's share of my career. Even boot deals, they kind of died a death quite early on in my career. Players would be getting paid. Now it's like credit, you'd get like, Adidas or Nike will give you a card and you can spend it on the website, and you'd get a couple of grand a year to spend on whatever you'd like. But gone are the days where, you'd be getting paid by these boot companies for just wearing their boots, unless, like I said, you're the top end.
We've interviewed a variety of different owners, and, the kind of recurring theme is that football clubs, sadly, are bad businesses. And the foundations of which the Football League is built on is incredibly precarious. Are you aware, as a player in the team, and are the team aware, that the businesses behind this are basically donated by millionaires? and they are bad businesses. Are you guys aware of the frailty of the business that is paying you?
Definitely not. Me personally, yes. So I was really fortunate. So in my 30s, I was 31, I was at Millwall. I decided to do an MBA, which again was a little bit born out of fear, because I thought, right, every year is a cherished year. Come 30, I want to be able to move into something seamlessly when I retire. I've got this time on my hands. Let's do an MBA. It only can help me. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to just getting home from training and going around Harrods or having a coffee with someone. As part of the MBA, when MBA grads will probably tell you, a lot of it is to do with, reflecting on the business that you currently work in. So for me as a player, it's very difficult to have access to a lot of information that you might need for an accounting module, for instance. So I got really lucky, and obviously, God rest his soul, John Berylson was my owner at Millwall, who was like a 10 out of 10 human being. He literally opened the cabinet for me at Millwall. I had access to everything. So he really drew the curtain back and showed me what it was like to run a football club, from everything down from the finances to the day-to-day operations. He was incredible with me and spent hours with me.
I know his son,
Jimmy.
Jimmy. I saw him a few weeks ago. But yeah, John was incredible. So to answer your question, yes, like I really understood how much John was personally supporting the club, how much his capital was propping up elements of what I would say about Millwall. It was an immaculately well-run club, always spent within their means, punched above their weight every single season. Definitely not one of the top spending clubs in the division.
But the players themselves don't understand.
Definitely not. I think they might have a headline in their head about certain things to do with that, but definitely not.
Would John be available for that information openly?
Honestly, I went to him. So he had done an MBA himself. He'd graduated from Harvard with an MBA. So I went to him originally because he was there a lot of the time at games, at the training ground. He'd sit and have lunch with us. And one thing about John, he could talk, like you could be sat there for an hour, which is great. But so when I mentioned to him, just in a fleeting conversation, I'm doing my MBA, it was as if like a light bulb went off in his head. And it's like, right, well, I'm going to help you. The minute I think the first thing we spoke about was, I've got this accounting module. I need to talk about the finances of my business. How on earth am I going to do that as a player? I don't have access to any of this information. So it's like, right, Mark's the FD. Here's his number. Ring him. He's going to give you everything. And then just sat on the phone with me for, hours talking about anything and everything. He was just telling me. He always said to me privately that he saw a little bit of himself in me, the way he went about things. And I don't know, it was almost like he was a proud parent. And Jimmy actually said the same thing to me when we spoke. It was almost like he was a bit of a proud parent, the fact that he had a player that was doing that he had done previously. So yeah, like incredible human.
An amazing club, shaking off a perception, I think, often built on the past. We've had Mark Fairbrother on the show, who's now CEO, talking about the work they're doing. What was it like as a player playing for them? Loved it, really loved it. So massive misconception of what the club's like. I think proper family club when you're in the building, really proper family club. I think I experienced it as an away player, even playing for Leeds, which was a fierce rivalry. What it's like as an away player is intimidating. And yes, they can, they've had headlines for the wrong reasons a lot of the time. And so I can understand the general wider public perception of what the club might be like. But as a player who's been in that environment, been with the fans, I loved it, absolutely loved it.
Can I ask, when you look at the relationship like you have there with an incredible owner like you mentioned, how do you feel about the private equitization, the professionalization of ownership structures that we're seeing in football today?
It's changing. Like I said, these ownership groups are kind of vast now. So whereas when you kind of could pinpoint it to one person and like a beacon of the club, it feels like it's like a broader, wider group. And I even seen at the back end of my time at Salford, the class of 92s now, obviously, giving up their shares, and it's a broader private equity group. And you're seeing it all over the Premier League now. I think what percentage is American private equty? It's
11 clubs.
Yeah, and it's only probably going to get bigger. It's like a real wave and a trend we're seeing. So
how do you feel about that?
Now being out of it, I don't think I have, as long as they're run well. And I think as long as they're run well, I think is the key. Like do
you think they're run well?
Some need to break down.
Yeah, I think you might need to break that down.
Who's run best and who's run worst?
I mean, I look at a club like Brentford. I look at a club like Brighton. I've always admired Brentford from afar for the simple reason that they recruit and sell incredibly well. Like, I always look at the strikers that they bring in. They'll score 20 goals, sell them. They'll bring another one in, and I think, okay, good luck to him. He'll score 20. They'll sell him. Even the Championship, they did it. You saw the turnover of centre forwards that would hit Neil Maupay, Ollie Watkins, Scott Hogan.
And they got Mbeumo in the Champ, didn't they?
Every single year they would do it. In the Champ, every single year they would do it, and I'd think like, wow, like whoever's doing their recruitment is, and I think they've probably set the trend of this whole Moneyball theme of data-driven analytics, data-driven recruitment, which I think has probably gone a little bit too far now.
Why do you think it's gone too far?
Because I think there's a lot more to. So Moneyball obviously was derived out the US, the whole Billy Beane, Oakland A's story that is obviously well documented. But I think with those American sports, particularly baseball, is so repetitive. That it's like an action that gets repeated over and over. Even in American football, you stop, you start, you stop, you start. Basketball, similar. Is when you with football, it's 90 minutes. It's constantly variable. There are so many, adverse weather conditions, pitches. Everything is so variable that I just think there's more to it than just the numbers. And I think certainly I experienced at the back end of my career where recruitment was so driven by numbers. Like if you didn't hit this metric, or you weren't this age, or you didn't fit into like an algorithm of sorts, you would be not, up for, you weren't an option basically. And I think it can go a little bit too far. I think character plays a huge part.
Who's the worst run?
The worst run I've ever seen was my experience at Leeds under Massimo Cellino, just because he was a full-blown lunatic. I mean, obviously he's, I think, had a number of like fraudulent things that have come against him. He's been arrested. He obviously failed the fit and owners test. Yeah, but just my experience, just like hugely disrespectful. Sacked numerous people across the club, the training ground, the stadium. Just really unstable. And I think that's something.
Did you feel that in the team?
Oh God. Yeah. So I signed, so my experience with him was nuts. I think he came in we had done great. It's my first season in the Championship. We had done great up to Christmas. I think we were 5th. And it was grumblings that he was going to take over in around that time. He took over. Brian McDermott was my manager, who was like, wonderful human, very well respected, incredible pedigree. And then we had a tricky January. We lost to Rochdale in the FA Cup, which is never good, in the 3rd round away. 2-0 was awful day. And then I think we lost another league game, and he sacked him. But out of the blue, we were flying in the league, but we just had a sticky couple of weeks. And he sacked him, and everyone was like, bloody hell, what's going on here? Like, he's been great. Do you know what I mean? We're doing fine. We just had a rough few weeks. There was a huge uproar from the fans. I think they protested at the ground, maybe did something to his car or something. Do you know what I mean? It was crazy. And then he reinstated him, and then he got sacked again. It was just so unstable. And then our results just I'm not saying it was because of him, but there's a lot more to it. But the results fell off a cliff, and going from 5th, I think we finished 16, 17.
Do you voice your disapproval as a player consortium, or is there a chasm between player communication and owner in that case?
Definitely. It definitely gets voiced, but I wouldn't say necessarily directly to the owner. It would be through a director of football type position. I think in that case, it's unique to that scenario. I don't think we did. I think the results, we just fell off a cliff entirely. And then I remember we broke up for the summer, and then naturally you get 6-7 weeks to go away and enjoy. We had a text message off the player liaison a week into my summer holidays saying, be at Ellen Road for a meeting with the owner, one-on-one meetings with the owner on the 2nd of June. And I was like, wow, that's and so he had done the minimum legal allowance of holidays, I think, is 3 weeks. So that was the day after that minimum time that you're allowed off. And he pulled us all into a meeting. So I was in America at the time. Everyone was scattered around the world, as they are, with family, guys with kids. And I remember the players' group chat was like, I'm not going back. I'm not going back for a meeting. Like, what's going on? Da, 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 da. And then the captain spoke to the PFA, and they were like, yeah, they can fine you like a week's wage or whatever, the hefty fine if you don't show up to a mandatory meeting. So I think there were a few lads that were like, I'm not going, da, 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 da. Sure enough, 2nd of June, I flew back from San Francisco, everyone was in the room. And I was in the room with him for 30 seconds. And then it was, okay, I'll see you at the end of June.
What did he say?
At the time, like I said, I'd had a good season, a really good season. Me and Ross McCormack were the highest scoring partnership in the country or something at the time. And I'd only signed a 2-year deal when I joined, so I had a 3-year deal waiting for me. And my agent was telling me that, you've got 3 years on the table for you. We just can't seem to get it over the line, but we will. Be patient. So half of me thought when I was going back for the meeting that like we'd talk about it. Do you know what I mean? But I remember going in and he was like, Smith, come in. And he was like, I have a meeting with your agent. We talk about money. All we talk about is the bloody money. And he's like, I'm not happy. And I was like, oh shit. Like, I thought we were getting somewhere. And then he was like, what else did he say? He was like, I remember seeing you against Bolton, and I was like, in my head, I was like, I didn't play against Bolton, I was injured. And then he was like, you did a degree in business. And I was like, yeah, I did. And he said, you can help me run the club. I was like, and he was like, okay, you go. And like shooed me out the room. And I left the room, I was like, I've literally flown 13 hours from America for that. and
there was nothing tangible.
Nothing. And everyone was the same.
Could have called you up.
Could have. I mean, it didn't even. I don't know what that literally word for word in verbatim what got said. Pre-season
what was
start.
the players' chat like
Just
that evening?
Fury. Just like I've left kids in. It was more for the guys with kids. They were like, I've left my wife and my kids on holiday, expense to come back, to then be told, right, you can go back on holiday now, and I'll see you at the end of June. Just like it was almost like a punishment, and that's how it felt. So I think lads were, peeved off. It wasn't just that. Like the training ground. Became Thorpe Arch, should I say, is an amazing training ground. Anyone who's been there will tell you the same. Amazing facilities, like really lovely place. Became a bit of a ghost town, really. Sacked everyone, drained the pool. All the recovery facilities were switched off. And it became like almost a place. No lunch, no food. You had to bring your own in if you wanted.
What?
Yeah, he said you could earn your food.
What?
Yeah, it became nuts. It became really, really nuts. Honestly, I could literally write a book like of that era. But the thing is, because the caretaker manager didn't have any influence or really no knowledge of what was going on, he was just literally taking training, doing the games. There was no, I guess, dialogue had all been lost between ownership and management.
Is everyone seeking an exit at that point?
I think everyone's just seeking some clarity. I think it was get to the end of the season and then see what brings. We ended up taking a non-league manager, Dave Hockaday, who no one had ever heard of with respect to him. Even he said the same thing about himself coming in. I mean, he lasted, if you Google his tenure, I don't think it was more than 8 weeks, whatever it was. It was really short. And then he just went through like a culling of different managers at that point. But I left, so...
What happened to the owner?
He eventually
got arrested.
Yeah, and then he
got arrested.
Yeah,
or initially,
he'd had a load of misdemeanors for different like fraudulent type activities.
Was there ever a time when the money didn't come through, like the salaries weren't paid or was delayed?
Yeah, a couple of instances where it's delayed. Always paid, but delayed.
What is the team chat saying that?
Yeah, angry because it's like anything. Like it's all.
Is it like, are we gonna get paid?
I think there's always, and you see it. Happen nowadays. Look at Sheffield Wednesday more recently. Like it does happen. I think it's just, it's a worry. People who have mortgages to pay, direct debits, big outgoings. If you're not paid on time and you miss those for whatever reason, it can be hard. And that's not to take pity on players. It's all relative. That's what I always say at the end of the day.
So was that the summer you went to Fulham?
Yeah. So I'd signed eventually back into the summer. I got the 3-year deal that we were speaking about in June. And got sold 2 weeks later, so I'd signed. The manager that I'd mentioned, Dave Hockaday, got the sack, and that day he came round to say his goodbyes to all the dressing room, and the assistant said to me, have you seen the list? I said no, and he said there's a list of six guys that he's put on the transfer list, and I was like, well, I'm not on, I've just signed a contract like a week ago for 3 years. He said, you're on the list. So I was like, so he's like, go up to the office now. So obviously they just vacated their office, and I went up to this, and sure enough, there were 6 names, and I was one of them. So I rang my agent, and he couldn't believe it. And then like a couple of days later, I heard there was some interest from Fulham, and because Ross McCormack, who had played well, had gone there. He fought my corner and said, right, they were struggling at the time, take him. And then I went to Fulham.
Fulham had just been relegated from the Prem.
Yeah. And
that was the Felix Magath chaos, right?
Yeah, that was interesting as well.
What happened?
Just, yeah. When listen, he's won 3 Bundesligas. He's admired by so many elite level players. But when you, and anyone at Fulham at the time will tell you, when you come in, you're like, wow, like this is mental.
Why?
Just like some like wild training tactics. And again, he got sacked within 10 days of me arriving. That was not the best time of my life either, because I'd come in, done really well in the first 10 days of training under him, started my first game against Reading, got sent off within 15 minutes on my Fulham debut.
You got sent off on your Fulham debut?
He got sacked after the following game, which I was suspended for. So, yeah, I got sent off 15 minutes in, touch tackle.
Wow.
Big pass into me from midfield, took a loose touch, and then just absolutely
centre forwards
wrote off someone's ankle. Yeah.
When you come out of that and you're sitting at home that evening, what are you thinking?
Why did you do that? Like, just why? Why didn't you just accept that it was a bad touch and just he was in the middle of the pitch. The player was looking towards his own goal. You see it happen so often.
It's your debut, right?
Yeah, it's your debut. Definitely that played a factor.
What would you say to a player who's approaching their debut? The nerves are high, the tension's high. What's your one bit of advice to them going into a debut?
Don't overthink it. It's just another game. Don't overthink it. I think often you can get caught up in the emotion of games, and it might be symbolic for a lot of it. Like, I hated playing against old teams, and I hated playing against maybe an old team where a lot of my close friends were on that other team. I used to really overthink it in my head about, you got to do well and da-da-da-da-da. That would be my one advice. Don't overthink it. It's just another game.
Were the Khans in charge then? I'm trying to think, 2014.
Yeah.
So how much of a role did they play? Did you speak to them?
Yeah, I loved them. Yeah, I got really close to Tony. He was definitely hands-on, which I don't mind. I don't mind if it's done in the right way. It's like if it's done in a pretty invasive way and it's very in your face.
What's the difference between good hands-on and bad hands-on?
Good hands-on for me is there's a presence, shake your hand, they'll have a chat with you. They're respectful. Bad hands-on is where you can see aggressive decision-making being made in front of your eyes. That's sometimes players might think, right, okay, you're in the boardroom, you're in the dressing room, you're in the canteen, you're here, there, and everywhere, and it feels like you've got a real presence. I always like the ones who are a little bit more. I'm sure, listen, they're going to have huge say in what goes on, but they're in front of the players. They're a little bit more on the back foot.
It was quite a strange dynamic, wasn't it? I remember it was quite comedic in loads of ways, because you had obviously Shahid Khan was the main owner of Fulham, but Tony, his son, was on the ground doing a lot of the communicative work, and he would be quite active on Twitter as well, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and you do see that more and more, like ownership groups being active on social media.
Do players dislike that?
I think, yeah, if they're super vocal, maybe they think, Christ, maybe they should just be a little less. Like, players will, obviously not be encouraged to engage with fans or in any sort of meaningful way. So I think if they see the ownership doing that, or I think it's the problem with. I think there's an undercurrent or belief with players that the ownership group is listening to the voice of Twitter, which isn't the voice that you probably should be listening to. I think Twitter can be a bit like a pub, not necessarily the people that are at the games that really understand the games. It could be anyone really. The keyboard warriors. And I think certainly some of the players might think that the owners are taking what they're saying really to heart. And I think the wider problem with society is this short-termism with everything. There's a lack of, everything's impulsive now. And I think things like social media, things like Twitter just exacerbate the situation. I think there's a lack of patience nowadays because of things like that.
Did you ever have some tough periods on social media when moving in between a number of rivals? If you're going Fulham, QPR, Millwall.
No, can I be honest? I always had a good rapport with all the fan bases I was at. I was really respectful of everywhere I went. I think fans will always take to you if you work hard for them. If you show that you care, if you wear your heart on your sleeve, you put your body on the line, you're committed. I think they'll always, moving obviously from West London to East London, yeah, the odd comment, but largely I had a really good relationship with all the fan bases that I was under, and I think it was just because I was honest. And
which club were you most happy to leave?
I was never happy to leave for any other reason than just playing more. The back end of my time at certain clubs, I was playing less. I was happy to leave for a professional reason, which was I was going to play. But actually, my experiences at all the clubs from like just a personal level were great. Like I got so lucky. I lived on the Fulham Road for 9 years and played for some massive London clubs. And it was great. I could live there, and I had half an hour to Motspur Park, I had half an hour to Heathrow, and I had 40 minutes to Bermondsey. It was wonderful. And then Leeds was just an incredible experience. Even take the ownership situation aside, which made it unstable. Like it's an amazing club, like incredible. Like that's a proper fan base, like fanatical fan base. And Brian McDermott used to say, he used to say every game's an event with Leeds. It's not just a game; it's an event. It's like the Premier League experience when you drive to the game and there's people walking from miles out, and it just feels like a real event. And that was Leeds in a nutshell.
Where did you play your best?
Bristol City. Probably played my best football at Bristol City, which was
on loan.
Which was on loan. Yeah. I probably played in terms of like clinicalness in front of goal. And then I think it was more like the thing I had in my career was fits and starts. Like I always had a season where I did well at a club, where I'd hit double figures and do well. And then in my last season at Salford, I scored 25 and then retired. So it's
for players on the back end of their career, what would you advise them in terms of dropping down leagues to play football versus retiring on a high?
It's a really good point. I think the common bit of advice or the common analogy that you'll hear time and time again as a player is play as long as you can, as high as you can, as long as you can. And you're a long time retired. You'll always get that. You're a long time retired, so play for as long as you can. And I can totally understand that. There is so much life to live after you retire. I think for me, it was different because I had something else to move into that was moving at a fast pace. And I was genuinely thinking 10 years versus 10 months. And that's what it is. Fundamentally, when you get to 32, 33, you just worry about the next 10 months, July to May, July to May, July to May. And then it's another year. It's rare that less common to get multi-year contracts once you get to a certain age. So yeah, if it's one of those where the path isn't necessarily clear and obvious, for sure, drop the leagues and play and keep enjoying it because you are a long time retired. But my advice first and foremost would be spin your plates, try and map out as best you can the near future. And if you don't know what you're going to do, then just spin your plates. And for me, I thought I wanted to be a director of football or work in a club and kind of marry up my business interests with my experience. But I fell into VC and that investment world because I just was open to different opportunities, and sure enough, that's the next part of my life now.
Salford, good club to play for?
Really good. I love the ownership group there. They're really hands-on, really respectful, really nice. It doesn't come with its difficulties. Obviously, I'd been in the Championship for 10, 11 years, and then I dropped down to a League Two team, which had just trying to find its feet from non-league. So there was elements of it that I found quite frustrating. But I wouldn't necessarily pin that on irresponsible ownership or anything like that, other than just the circumstance, gigs, goals. But Beckham was obviously less hands-on. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. It was just times of Salford which are really frustrating in terms of quality of training ground, the quality of the pitch. Elements of it were run well, away day travel, hotels and stuff were spot on, but there were elements of it that were a bit non-league.
Going and scoring like 25 goals was back end of your career. So, it must have been a lot of fun, but was there a marked difference between you dropping down two leagues, even later stage in your career? Did you, I'm not saying did you find it easy, but did you suddenly walk in there going, okay, I need to maybe, I don't need to be as...
Yeah, it wasn't that I found it easy per se, because I definitely didn't find it easy. It was very physical and a lot more physical maybe than the Championship. Generally the defenders, I think the higher you go, and more so now, is the defenders maybe become a bit more slight and a bit more ball playing, whereas down there they're all like wardrobes. So it's like every game's a fight, and the referee, the quality of that's one big difference. Quality of officiating is really poor in the lower leagues.
That's
really poor, and really noticeable for someone like me who's just constantly having duels all the time and not getting anything, and it's just mental.
You have just shit kicked out of you.
Yeah, basically. Biggest difference for me was the number of chances that you'd get in a game, defensive errors, goals that would lead from defensive errors is much, much higher, and quality of goalkeeping was noticeably different as well. So, for that reason, you end up getting more opportunities, and when you do shoot, goes in probably more than when you're in the higher leagues. That was what I found to be different.
Did you ever get a sniff at an opportunity to play in the Prem?
January of Leeds, Crystal Palace. But nothing ever materialised, unfortunately. That was my one opportunity, But
did you ever get a sniff at playing internationally?
Again, that same time, Scotland. My dad was Scottish, so that was my route into international football, was Scotland. Really good striking group of strikers at that time, and I probably was 1 or 2 injuries away from getting called up. But yeah, that was probably my time, my peak Leeds years, where I was young and just broken through, and I think I was a bit of a shock to the system in terms of my size. And I had that January time when I think I'd hit 10 by Christmas or New Year. I think that was when I was like, right, I could either get a Scotland call-up or get a move, and unfortunately neither happened. And that's probably not a regret of my career, but like if I look back, I'm proud of a lot of things. One is longevity. Playing in the Championship for a long time is something I'm proud of for a lot of really good big teams. But missing out on the opportunity to play in the big league, because I genuinely think I could have had an impact in it being so different. I actually found playing against defenders in the higher leagues easier, because certainly in the Premier League, they weren't used to the physicality of a big target man. They're used to more slight strikers who are play off the shoulder or quicker. My FA Cup, games and my experiences against Premier League teams in the cup competitions, I actually found it to be a bit easier.
Give that story. It's probably your crowning moment, and it sheds a negative light on a team that I'm very happy to shed negative light on.
No, it was my sliding doors moment. That's definitely in my career when my sliding doors moment was 18 months of pro sport going terribly, and then turned on its head in a month. In January 2013, 2 goals against Liverpool, 2 goals against Everton. I suddenly went from like a real imposter syndrome of being in pro sport to, right, I've proven I can do it against the very best opposition. Confidence grew. I ended up doing really well in the league off the back of it. Left a free agent because up to January, I definitely wasn't getting a contract renewal from Oldham, and then signed for Leeds. So it was definitely the real pivotal moment in my career, and that kind of opened the doors for everything that then came.
But to give that context, you played at Anfield, scored twice in a 3-2 win.
That was at home. That was at home. We won 3-2 at Boundary Park. Yeah, definitely hostile. I remember the start of the game. Luis Suarez was on the penalty spot taking the kick. I was like shivering like this, and I was thinking, he's not up for this. He doesn't fancy this today. But it was a great Liverpool team. They had Stevie G. The front three, I think, was Sterling, Sturridge, and Suarez. Like, it was a heavy team that played. It wasn't like a mediocre 11.
Is Suarez just a nutter?
Oh, he's a savage. Like, he's so good as well. He's so good. And that's why I enjoy playing against big teams. It's like you see these guys live and then you test yourself against them.
Who are you most impressed by?
Gerrard, for sure. Like, his ability to control a game. Like, so I played against him a couple of times. We got thumped against Liverpool in another cup competition, 5-1 at Anfield. And again, like, just ability to just control a game. Even on my back end, when I played against Wayne Rooney at Derby, that was a weird one because he played central midfield and controlled the game. And I looked at him, I thought, you're barely running. Like, you're just kind of, your positional sense and your football IQ is so high that, like, I feel like because he was the deep line midfielder and my job was to kind of drop in on him. Listen, I'm not the most mobile, but for 90 minutes, I thought, Jesus Christ, like, I feel like you've not broken a sweat, mate, and you're absolutely running the game. Those are always the kind of moments that I think as a player who hasn't played in the Premier League or at the highest level is like, I love those moments because you really see up close how good these guys are.
Do you think that football IQ is innate?
To a degree, yeah. You're kind of born with it to a degree. Listen, you can get coached for sure, but I think certain elements of, like, they always say, like, the first 5 yards are in your head, and it's true. Like, some guys just can see. Remember Scott Parker? I always remember things he would say. My captain at Fulham, he was like, always have 2 or 3 passes in your mind before the pass comes into you. Like, always play a few passes ahead. And he was always like that. Like, he would, again, run games, and he was in the back. I would love to have played with him in his prime, but he was always that way inclined. Like, it's all in your head. It's all between your ears. Like, just have those passes in your mind before you actually get the ball.
Was he the best player you played with?
I mean, as a player, yes, but I probably caught him at the tail end of his career when he had a few ankle issues and stuff like that. But no, played with a lot of great players.
Who was the best manager that you played for?
Best coach, Steve McLaren, for sure. And a lot of players that have had him as a coach will say the same thing.
Why?
Training sessions were really good. I'm not a guy who loves training, but I really enjoy training under him.
Why?
Short, sharp, intense, to the point, doesn't drag the arse out of it. You don't have to listen to his voice all the time. He's got everything set up. You go from thing to thing to thing to thing. You feel good after it. Lively, gets everyone going. With the ball, absolutely. Yeah, just simple things. Like sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You've got 4 or 5 stations set up. You keep it lively. Everyone's sharp. You do the plan before you go out. You don't have to then spend too much time talking and waiting around, listening to them speak. Like,
what were the worst training sessions you did?
Ones that would be like 2+ hours long, just dragging the arse out of it. You stood around for ages. You can get a bit cold because you're literally listening to so much information. It's like information overload. Like for me as well, like I suffered with my joints a lot in my career. So like for me, those short, sharper sessions were definitely more beneficial than just being on my feet for hours on end,
Who was the most nuts?
Holloway, by a mile. And it was just his personality. I remember my first game with him was, I couldn't play. So we were playing Newcastle away at St James's Park, and they didn't do the registration. It moved in the January deadline day, and they didn't do the registration quick enough for me to be eligible for that game. But it was like, I want you to come. You're on a plane to Newcastle. So I went to Heathrow, flew to Newcastle, joined up with the team in the hotel, had dinner, had pre-match meal with them. You're on the bus, come watch the game, sit behind the dugout. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'm there, and we're just literally like motoring from the Hilton to the stadium. He's the only voice I can hear. He's like shouting on the bus, like, right, lads, are we going to get up for this game or what? And as we're driving to the ground, he's literally at the front of the bus, like the huge window going, come on, like, shouting like that. I think
to everyone else? To back into the bus?
No, to the front, to the fans that were waiting at the stadium. All the lads behind were like, oh my God.
Are the players like,
yeah, I found it hilarious, yeah. And then like he would dance. I got some funny videos on my phone of him dancing in the dressing room like before games. But it chilled you out, I guess. If you saw the manager being that eccentric, Holloway was just so, every day was a story. Do you know what I mean? Like you'd be out doing training one day, you're just getting going, and they'd be like, right, lads, we're going bowling. And like you just stop and we'd go 10-pin bowling. Or so just randomly.
I was chatting to an Arsenal player the other day, and he said that Wenger was the best because Wenger would take each player aside before every game and say, I had a dream last night. And in the dream, it was your best game. And he'd take me aside before we got on the bus. And then he'd take the other person aside after the bus and the other one before the dressing room. And everyone felt that it was their game. And it was specifically, I had a dream about you. And he did it with everyone he chose.
I think that's often the case with good managers, is not necessarily the repetitive nature of the behavior you're saying there, but it's like the ability to be a bit of a chameleon in the dressing room and understand what gets people going. Like for me, I always responded well to someone that I was intimidated by, like element of fear, like play because otherwise there might be a consequence. I didn't need an arm around my shoulder. I didn't need someone telling me you're amazing, you're so good, which other players,
some players
do need. The best managers were able to understand what,
Who was the best manager you played against?
I'm going to be honest, the most impressive I've seen is Vincent Kompany.
Really?
Why?
Spoke multiple languages, different players live in the game. It's so impressive. He'd speak German, he'd speak Spanish, he'd speak French. It's so impressive to watch live. Yeah. I was like, wow. And apparently his talks are nuts as well. So yeah, actually he gave me an hour of his time as well. So when I did my MBA, I'd found out that he had done an MBA at Manchester. So I spoke to him for an hour about the degree, what I was setting myself up for, why he did it. And he was, really,
what
really
did
nice
you
guy.
take away from that hour?
Just what a good guy he is. But obviously, listen, the nooks and crannies of what I was getting myself into in far as, time commitment and how that looked. He owns a lot of companies and he wanted to really understand the inner mechanics of the way his businesses work, not just like my name's at the top of the tree here and everyone else is working for me. Like he wanted to understand, whereas my reasons were, I kind of thought that the business of sport was my future. So yeah, we spoke for ages, but no, he was really, really cool guy. He had 3 kids, captain of his national team, European competitions, and captain of Man City. So he had a lot more on his plate than maybe I did. But no, really smart guy.
Should we do a quick fire round?
Go for it.
Okay, so tell me, which game were you most nervous before?
God, this isn't quick, is it?
They never are.
They never are. Playoff games that I've been involved in, when it's knockout and it's like promotions on the line, definitely those games I would say. second leg of a playoff game. I've had a couple of those where, supremely nerve-wracking in the sense that like the outcome is all derived off this next 90 minutes. More so than a cup competition, I think playoffs just feel a bit different.
Which club had the best food?
Fulham.
Really?
Fulham,
Shock.
definitely.
Yeah.
Fulham was unique. You could have chicken and veg for breakfast if you wanted, which I found odd.
Did people?
Yeah, Dan Burn had it every day. I always found it bizarre.
You get 6'8"
I
or
always
7.
used to tell him every single morning when he had this like leafy cabbage vegetable medley on his plate.
Were players incredibly disciplined?
Yeah, big time. That's the one thing I always thought is my curiosity when I played non-league was like, what are these higher league players like? What's the mentality like? You really quickly find out why they survive, why they have longevity when they're at that level for sure. And it is like sheer discipline, dedication, sacrifice is like really in abundance. I think the whole like talent isn't enough comment is so true. Guys at the upper level, they are really sacrificing and really dedicating, and that really resonated with me as soon as I got to that level for sure.
What's the biggest sacrifice you made, you think?
Time, I'd probably say. Just, making sure I was doing all the right things and applied time to getting in the building early, training, doing my extra training after training, eating the right things, applying my time in a way that was benefiting me on the pitch and not, going out all the time or eating things I shouldn't, drinking things I shouldn't, just not getting enough sleep. I think my application to time was
compounding 1%, right?
Yeah, totally. Big believer in the 1%. And I think certainly at that level, there's a real fine line between good and great. And I think those 1% can really make a huge difference.
What's the most lavish purchase you spent on?
I think we all have that one car purchase. I got a Porsche 911 Turbo when I was at Fulham. That's probably my one supremely...
Were you happy when you got it?
Oh yeah.
All of this.
When they had the it was at the
That's so great. This episode was brought to you by Porsche.
It was at the Porsche garage, which is that new Bacchanalia restaurant, in Berkeley Square, when I had the glass front, and it was like there waiting for me. The glass door went, and I just drove out into Berkeley Square with it. I absolutely loved it. I loved that car. It just wrecked my knees and my back though, so I chucked it in after about 18 months.
How do you fit it?
It was actually a bit more roomy than, but yeah, it was my one sports car experience. It's an awful investment. Listen, big depreciating asset. I lost a lot of money on that in the space of probably 18 months, but
you had fun.
In the space of about 5 seconds, actually.
Just driving out into
you had fun.
But I had fun. Listen,
how much was it?
At the time, 140, I think, which is a lot of money. It is a lot of money still for a car. But that was probably my one.
Were you married?
Single.
Don't be stupid.
Definitely not.
You can tell he's not married.
Definitely. Yeah, I have a family car.
Your wife must have fun.
No, I was definitely not married. But yeah, that was probably my one. And I like a nice holiday. So I've had a few nice holidays where I probably spent more than I should have. But no, generally over.
What's the most batshit crazy thing you've seen someone spend money on in a team?
Like probably reckless spending on nights out, I would say. Probably like pound for pound, what's an awful...
Like how bad was that?
Like 20, 30K and maybe a night out, yeah. Yeah, silly money. Like I've seen horror shows as well. I've seen like people like rock, paper, scissors over even bigger sums of money just for like nights out, which that's a bit excessive for me.
How do you do
card roulette?
Card roulette.
20, 30K on a night out?
Just a few bottles of champagne.
Yeah, it's not much nowadays.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've seen some much worse bills than
Dude, I don't drink and I don't go out.
You can't drink that much. Yeah, it's more just for it's just.
Actually, vintage like.
It's just outrageous. It's just.
But it's just like a status game at that point.
Pure status game at that point. Absolutely.
So.
And you bring a few people onto your table, and suddenly,
if you're paying for everyone,
that's so sad.
Yeah,
but
not my cup of tea. Listen, I enjoy a night out as much as the next guy, but yeah, not to that.
Will we see British sports stars open up to business in the same way that we've seen American?
Yeah, I think I speak firsthand. Like guys here definitely aspire to the success and status of those guys, and there's definitely an openness to guys really learning and understanding, which is really, really positive. I just think we're behind the curve. I think it will catch up in time, and I think the more people there are out there that are educating, providing access, providing resources for them to play that game, I think will only stand the guys in good stead. But I definitely think we will, and I definitely think there's a desire for guys to go in that direction. It's just about providing the means.
It's amazing. As I said at the beginning, having this conversation has been pretty special, considering it was one of the main reasons we thought about even starting something like this.
A full circle moment for me as well.
So
this is my entry point, and now retired and in this world now. It's definitely a full circle moment for me as well. And also, we have a lot of athletes listen. It's so important they hear this kind of stuff from someone that does it well. So thank you for sharing it. Thank you, lads.